Hey, how's it going, Ev?
Good, K-Man, and yourself?
I'm doing all right on this lovely evening here.
Fantastic.
So, what episode is this?
Episode 9.
All right, episode 9. We'll leave Star Wars out of this, but we'll continue on. So, I guess we're in the midst of the same situation we were when last we recorded, and I think more of the world now is in a state of lockdown and in a state of, let's say, high alert and stress. How are things on your end?
Yeah, so for me, I'm quite good with it. The government has sort of implemented measures so that, people don't have to stress out so much about their economic and financial situation. So for me, luckily, I guess as a person living in, a developed country with a good welfare system, I don't have to worry so much anymore about it. So it's really just sticking inside and, practicing physical distancing and self-isolating and all those great words that are new to our vocabulary. And so, yeah, I'm actually feel quite fortunate that I have this opportunity and this time to delve deeper into my spirituality, let's say. And it's been fantastic. Good opportunity to practice the things that I've learned in my daily life, as well as just to sort of, take a step back, slow down, and sort of experience life in a way that, for myself, I feel is much more natural to the human being, like a much more slower pace, more time with the family, more time discussing things that are really important to us as a species and as a society. So, I've actually, despite all this sort of tragedy that's happening around the world, I feel that it's been a great opportunity for a lot of individuals and us as a global community to take that step back and during this soft reset and reevaluate what we're bringing to life, I guess.
Yeah, I've observed that this virus is a great equalizer because it doesn't matter what you believe, where you're from, what you practice, whatever it is you use to, let's say, identify yourself as different from another group or another person. The virus doesn't care about that. It infects with equal opportunity, right? So it's a very good equalizer in a sense, in that no one can be kind of like othered at this time because everyone is vulnerable to this virus. So yeah, in that sense, I think it's a great unifier in some sense. And even though we have to practice what people are calling social distancing, that seems to be the buzzword these days. But it does bring everyone together in the fact that we're facing a common threat, let's say, and we're all susceptible to it. No one is 100% safe, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's said that, depending on your age, it might be more detrimental. It's still no guarantee.
Yeah.
And it's invisible. You can't see where it's going to come from, and you can't see it on people. You can't see it on surfaces. So once again, there's lots of uncertainty, but in that uncertainty, we're all together. And yeah, I've been observing a lot of people, being more amicable with each other. People taking the time to say hello and how are you doing, and lots of activity, I guess, on social media. I think this is where social media is doing a great service, where people are connecting more and they have the time to connect more. That's the whole thing, is that, social media as it is usually being used by people or a population that is going out to work and has a busy schedule and trying to juggle a lot of things. Whereas now it's being used by people that have a lot of time on their hands, a lot of time to think about their life, a lot of time to reflect, and a lot of time to catch up on things that they've been putting off. So as we go deeper into this, you could say, self-isolating time period on the planet, people are going to be coming more and more settled to their keyboards, to their phones, to their microphones, to their mouses, to their screens, because I've don't have to go to work. I'm cleaned up the house. I've done all the things I was wanting to do, checked off my list, and I've watched way too much TV, and I'm bored of the medium. And so now what do I wish to think about? What do I wish to discuss? And so a lot of people have leisure time that they wouldn't have had before. And there are some schools of thought that say if you want someone to show their true face, put them under pressure or give them lots of leisure. Either way, they're going to reveal to you and themselves who they really are. What do you do when you have so much time on your hands? Or what do you do when you're in a crisis? And so, in both situations, I would propose, no matter what you think or what you believe, where your heart turns to in these times is what one truly worships, for lack of a better word. And, that word in itself is very loaded with lots of meanings that can be attached to it. But really, it's what you kind of depend on. We're in a time of crisis, so where is your heart, your emotional center turning towards in order to draw from? Because emotions are kind of like a fuel. And so, if you're feeling a certain way, you'll have thoughts that kind of reflect that. And then when thoughts and emotions are doing that, your actions and your words will also reflect that. And so it reverberates outward. But it starts from your emotional state. So, are you fueling yourself with fear? Are you living off of that? Are you living off of anxiety? Are you living off of love? Are you living off of peace? So, be vigilant of your heart during this time. And if you find yourself living off of something that is not relatively positive, then perhaps this is a good time and a good place to start to make that change on the innermost level of yourself. To say, I'm now going to fuel my thoughts and actions from the emotion of peace, or from the emotion of love, or from compassion, rather than fear and its lieutenants. And that kind of brings me to something we've discussed a lot, right? And it's the Heartspace. For you, right? I guess we've discussed this a lot, so
yeah, I
would hand it off to you to kind of give a description of what you perceive or conceptualize as the Heartspace.
Yeah, I guess has lots of names. I guess Heartspace is one that, came up during our conversations, but it can be characterized in so many different ways. Like, for me, it's the self or consciousness, or the absolute, or the unmanifest. It has so many names. And like we've discussed before, it's really just that space in which all things arise. That's the true center. So it doesn't really have much to do with an actual physical space, because when you're in the heart space, it doesn't seem to be anywhere and everywhere at the same time. And what arises within it is your experience. But the heart space itself has no inherent quality. Muji describes it as fragrances. It has specific fragrances like love and peace, or it could be bliss, joy. These sort of feelingless feelings that arise when you're centered in that space. So we describe it a lot as peace, and that seems to be, for myself anyway, the general sense that's felt when you're deep within the heart space. And the sort of plethora of emotions can arise within that space. You know, happiness and sadness and guilt and anger. They can all arise in that heart space. And the heart space is like this total encompassing, engrossing, like nothingness that just holds it all in complete love and acceptance. Mm-hmm. That's for me what the heart space is.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe something as such using words. Mm. You could say, if everything is arising from and within that space, how do the things arising in that space describe where they came from? Mm. Because whatever they use to describe where they came from is using something else that's also arisen within that space.
Yes, that's a good point.
And so I guess one of the hopes we have in this podcast is to turn your attention towards that. But there's nothing that we can really say that can ever truly describe it.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can be pointed to, directed towards, encouraged towards, inspired towards, bringing your attention to that aspect within yourself and within everybody so that you may have a direct experience of it. And let that be the factor for change going forward, as opposed to try to follow anything that you or I really say. Direct experience beats all.
Totally. That's it. And I guess because it's so hard to describe, because it has no quality, but is everything, let's say, it's easier to approach for the human being by understanding what you're not. That seems to be the clearest sort of path, I guess, to sort of experiencing that which is, but has no substance that you can describe. So you just start slowly picking away at what you know you're not. But that does take sort of a level of introspection and time to delve into. We sort of looked at it in episode 6. We talked about it a bit. But I think that's why a lot of sort of spiritual paths are about sort of, peeling away the onion. They talk about it like that, where you slowly take away one layer and then one layer and then one layer until you're left with nothingness. Yeah.
Perhaps we can try to unpack it, as you were saying, the neti process, as is referred to in Hinduism and yoga. of saying, I'm not this and I'm not that. So you can kind of define what you're not. And what you're left with is kind of what you are, but that can't be known in the way that the mind knows things, which is as a separate object from itself. So there can no longer be subject-object. There's only subject remaining. And so the mind doesn't know how to process or understand that. So all one can do is be that, but you can't know that. So if you're listening now, I'm going to give you a thread, and we're going to just follow a thread. And hopefully that can turn your attention towards the direction of the heart space. So consider, if you will, your experience. Just everyday life. And you have everyday interactions. You have everyday thoughts. All the things within your experience, right, are coming in through your 5 senses. So you take in your sight, you take in the sound, the touch, the smells and tastes. And you are combining all of these things, and they come to you as kind of like the 3D experience of you living life. And people talk about a sixth sense, like it's something, I don't know, like psychic powers, the ability to read minds, or, you know, I see dead people and all that stuff, right? But what came to me in a meditation one day was my sixth sense is how I feel, my emotions. I am totally capable of sensing my emotions. And if I'm paying attention, you can kind of also sense the emotions of the person you're interacting with. Unless they're going out of their way to hide them. So I said to myself at the time, oh my, I have overlooked this as one of my senses for so long. Because, you know, we're taught that we have 5 senses, and then, you know, there's the 6th sense stuff, but that's kind of mumbo jumbo stuff. And, you know, so let's stick with these 5, and that's life. But what if I considered my emotions just as important a sense, if not the most important, as compared to the rest of them? Because consider, if you will, for a moment, that if I took the emotion, if I took my ability to sense my own emotions out of my experience, then life would be appearing to me as a movie, a 3D movie, a very real, immersed movie, but I wouldn't care about it one way or the other. It'd just be appearing to me, and I'd be like, all right. So what makes the experience real to me, important to me, have meaning to me, all stems from my ability to sense my emotions relative to what's happening. So if I overlook this one sense, life loses its entire meaning to me. So to overlook this sense, it was brought to my attention at the time that this is a great oversight. And yet most people, let's say if your senses were like a round table, and your sight and your touch and your taste and your smell, right? And your hearing were all at a round table, and they were talking to your mind saying, well, this is the data we have, and so let's make a decision about where to go next. And the whole time, my heart's been at the table, but I haven't been kind of giving it a voice. Yet, if the heart wasn't at the table, you could say the whole discussion would become moot. Because I wouldn't care how it turns out one way or the other. So, what I refer to as the sixth sense, how do you feel emotionally, became very important in my way of experiencing things and observing things. So I'm also now using my emotions to sense my way through my experience. And so if we look at this, and let's say, if you ask yourself now, how do you feel? Right? Most people kind of go to a space around their chest in their heart, right? As that's the space where I understand how I feel. So if I'm angry, I'll feel a clenching there. Or if I'm fearful, I'll also feel kind of a clenching there. But when you're really happy and joyful, it's almost like they say it wells up in your throat, right? You ever cry from tears of joy? It wells up in your throat from that place. And your chest is also kind of tight, right? But it feels like you're going to burst, as opposed to you're going to contract more and more. But it all has to do around that area in the center of yourself, where you find, oh, there's that sinking feeling. What sank to where? So that space around your solar plexus or your heart, you can call it, that center of yourself, is where most people in their experience become aware of their emotional state. And so the heart itself can be seen as an organ of perception, just like your eyes and your ears, your mouth and your nose and your skin. And so when we look at our experience now, our heart is what we want to have peace. If our heart is at peace, then whatever's happening with the rest of the senses is kind of all right. And if you kind of look at what you've been doing throughout your life, without knowing it, you've been trying to make your heart feel okay, or your heart feel happy. So even though you haven't been giving voice to this sense, it's been the one you've been trying to please the most. And we find different ways of doing it externally through experiences, getting something, obtaining an object, buying something, drugs, alcohol, sex, right? Thrills, roller coasters, whatever it is, right? I got a new job, getting some money, right? Finding an amazing partner. And you get that boost in your heart feeling, oh, this feels so good. But where do you feel good? You feel good in your heart. You feel good. But it doesn't last. And so it may last for a while, but it can't last forever. And so you'll find yourself again going out through your senses into your experience, looking for another way to make your heart feel content, happy, at peace. But where you're turning your attention to in order to gain this feeling in your heart is through your senses, through your mind, and outwards towards the world at large, so to speak, out there. And the one rule we know about the outer universe outside of ourselves, and the entire universe actually as far as we know, is that it must remain in a constant state of change. It finds moments of order and maintains moments and times of balance. But entropy, which is disorder or chaos, is always on the increase. And so to look for our happiness out there is like building a castle on shifting sands. And spirituality and these great religious figures and spiritual figures and, sages and masters and messiahs down the ages have all said they have found something in which they can finally have rest. They found a permanent source for happiness and peace and contentment that's always there, that never changes. And they all seem to agree upon the point that this was not found outside of themselves through the senses, but was found within themselves. So to seek your contentment, peace, and happiness out there, you can find it, but we both honestly know that it can't be maintained. And if you try to maintain it out there, this is where you open yourself up to become addicted with diminishing returns, or begin to open yourself up to the potential of not being fully honest or compassionate with others in order to maintain that thing that you're getting from the outside that's making you feel happy inside. So if I like money, then I might do things to get that money that don't sit well with my conscience or don't sit well with others in order to keep that coming, to maintain that flow coming in, to the detriment of the environment or the detriment of the people or things around me. The same thing is true for sex. The same thing is true for drugs. The same thing is true for any objects, right, that we attach, that we look to in order to get these feelings. And it's because our mind is turned outwards. And the heart follows then the mind in its search. But what if we just tried letting the heart lead and the mind follow? So if you're sitting there right now listening, instead of looking for something and asking, what makes me happy? What if you, let's say, imagined that your brain or your mind was cut off from the heart? So your heart was left alone by itself with no concept of the world, with no input coming in through the senses, the other 5 senses. And the heart was left alone by itself, with no concept of the outside world. Let's try that for a moment. So that the heart was left to feel without thought. Just feel. Don't let any concepts lead it or lead your attention away from your feeling. Just feel. Without any concepts. Without the outside world, as if it didn't exist. or as some would say, chop your head off for a moment. What is the natural state of your heart when it is untouched by the mind and the senses? Left on its own. The natural state of your heart is peace. You don't have to look for peace outside. Your natural state in your heart, where you're trying to find peace, is peace itself. Your natural state is peace. You don't have to do anything to get it. You are it. This is the Heartspace. Take time to let your heart be free of the world. Meditate upon it. Delve into the depths of yourself. Put the world aside. Become familiar with this place again. Gently, at first, whenever you can remember to do it in the day. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. Just the remembrance of it, and then turning your attention towards the heart. You can use a simple question. How do I feel? And no matter what you're feeling, your attention is on the space where you feel. So just keep asking yourself, how do I feel? And whatever's there, don't articulate it. Don't let it form into thoughts. Just feel it. Even if it is anger or fear, anxiety, extreme happiness, giddiness. Just sit with it and feel it. Don't let it form into a concept. You don't need words to feel. You don't need concepts to feel. You don't need thoughts to feel. None of that is necessary. You can just feel directly. With no interpretations. And then it becomes like an energy. You'll feel it tugging, almost encouraging you to put it into a concept, to express it, to do something with it out there, or on the level of the mind, or on the level of words and articulation. But just breathe and feel. Take deep breaths and feel. And if you need to, take deep breaths and let them out like sighs of relief. Not letting your mind touch it. Letting this be a completely heart-centered affair. And given enough time, it will pass. As if the heart then spit out all concepts of the mind, of the world, of words and thoughts, and could clearly see itself again, untouched, in its natural state. Peace. How do you feel? And notice that if you keep this connection alive within your awareness of the heart in its natural state, your mind is much quieter, cooler, calmer, because now the heart is leading. And the mind can finally say, I was never meant to lead, 'cause I don't know. And it can finally take a long, well-earned vacation. Because now it's taking its cues from the heart. And when the heart is not in the position of having to follow the back and forth of the mind, it rests in its natural state, peace. Let your heart be your guide. Let the mind follow it. And feel that relaxation throughout your entire being. How do you feel? Keep the awareness of your heart space with you as you go through the day, like you're keeping a candle lit on the inside. And the only thing you need to do to keep that candle lit is to keep your awareness upon it. Upon the heart space. And knowing this about the true nature of yourself, showing it to yourself gently, in time, consistently, and with discipline, and eventually with no effort at all. You're slowly bringing your entire being into union, yoking it to your natural state. Yoga, unity, oneness. an added benefit of this is that if you're aware of how you feel, if you ask yourself, how do you feel? The answer, the awareness, the attention must always inform you of now. No need to use mental gymnastics to bring you into the moment. How do you feel? Deepen your relationship with this and let all birds come home to roost. Deepen it, widen it, open it, sink into it. Don't let any part of yourself be excluded from it. No need to look outside any further. Peace waits within you. It is you. In the one heart that we all share. For in this heart space, are not we all the same? One heart space, many minds, many expressions. But turned within, only one.
So this is something that we've been doing for quite a long time now, Cayman and I. So it's extremely easy for us to sink into that heart space at the drop of a dime. So if you're new to this and maybe you're feeling frustrated by it, or even frustrated when you're listening to this because you're like, oh, I just can't seem to get there. I don't understand. It's all good. It's all good. Just be diligent in your practice. Create a practice if you have none. Take the time to sit down and meditate. And then in your daily life, be vigilant. Once you start sitting down, you'll notice the chaos of the mind. And it's so many people when they start to meditate say, I don't like meditation because I'm not good at it. My mind just can't stop my mind. That's common. That's normal for the human being. But you develop that discipline of will to continue to try. To continue to sit down. If you need to, listen to these guided meditations over and over and over. And keep coming back to that space. And then you'll start to find that sense of peace and start sinking into it naturally. And you'll begin to develop techniques and recognize pattern of behavior that will automatically sink you back into that space. And if you're someone who's listening who's had a lot of experience and can quickly sink into the heart space, this is where vigilance is extremely important for you. Because often what will happen is the mind will come in and say, I know this. I know what to do. I know what you're talking about. I don't need to learn this. I don't need to do that. I'm sweet. But be careful. The mind is extremely cunning. And whenever you have that pattern crop up, then use that as a catalyst to sink back into stillness in that heart space. There is no ending to this journey for the human being. You must always come back. All the time. Because there'll be something that you weren't aware of. Some experience will happen in your life that you weren't prepared for. Always, as often as you can, come back to that space. It's challenging, I know. You might say, I've got a stressful job. I've got 3 kids I have to feed. I've got sick parents I have to take care of. Your mind will come up with all sorts of excuses not to do it. But take heart. Yeah. You, like everyone else, is a reflection of the Almighty, of the Absolute.
And for those of us in stressful situations that say, I understand, but I've got stuff to do and I got to do this and I have to do that, I would pose the question is, you still will have to do those things. But who would you rather interact with your family, friends, and humanity in general as? The one living from their heart space, or the one whose heart is being dragged behind an unrested mind? So, what's happening might not change. But how you are happening in the midst of what's happening may. And the joy of it is remembering that you don't have to go anywhere anymore. That place of rest, that thing that you're really looking for, home, is where the heart is. So, another way to word practice this as often as possible is to just, in the words of a very wise monkey, a very wise lion. Remember who you are. Peace be upon you. One love.
One love.